I'm Kristyn Berger, and I'm the president of Berger HR Solutions. I help small and mid-sized business owners by mitigating risk, but also helping them improve the performance of their teams and the organization overall. Many small business owners ask me what they should be looking for when hiring an HR professional. Whether you're hiring an internal employee to manage your HR function or hiring an external HR consultant like myself, you should make sure that you find someone who can not only help you with the day-to-day HR operations, but can also help you think more strategically from an HR perspective. In my experience, many HR professionals have a bad rap for being policing, paper pushing, party planning professionals, when in fact what you should be looking for is someone who can truly act as a partner. A solid HR professional will help you with things like employee engagement, performance management, helping you think about succession planning, workforce planning for the future, not just the day-to-day HR. So definitely look for that true strategic partner versus more of that traditional old school HR. Many employers think that the first impression that a new employee has of their business is created during the onboarding process. In fact, that first impression is formed during the interview process. That's why it's really important to make sure that you have a clear, concise, professional process that is fair to all candidates. There's a couple best practices that I recommend when interviewing. The first is to go through all resumes received and pick out those who meet the basic qualifications. From there, with those candidates, you should conduct an initial phone screen. The purpose of the phone screen isn't to go through an entire interview. It's really just to talk through the candidate's resume, ask any clarifying questions that you may have regarding the information on their resume, and talk to them about their expectations of the position. You might find during the phone screen that the job's not quite the right fit, what they're looking for. Maybe it doesn't meet their salary expectations. And then it's easy to knock those candidates out of the process because you don't want to continue wasting their time and yours if it's truly just not the right fit on their end. From there, you should schedule the in-person interviews. In-person interviews should always be conducted with the hiring manager or anyone who has influence over the hiring decision. During that interview, you want to make sure you're asking technical questions to make sure that they have the skills and experience needed to be successful in the job. But most of your time should be asking questions of a behavioral nature. So questions like, tell me about an accomplishment that you're proud of and why. Or tell me about a time that you dealt with a difficult client and how did you handle the situation. What those questions really get at are what is their past behavior and how may that predict the behavior that they'll show if they're actually selected for the job. Yes, you want to know that they have the skills and experience, but you also want to make sure that they're going to fit in with your culture and are going to exhibit the behavior that you would want to see in a top employee. The most important thing during the interview process is to make sure that you're fair and consistent. So when structuring questions, whether for your phone screen or for the in-person interview, make sure that you're asking similar questions to all candidates. Always focus on neutral criteria, on their skills and experience, behavioral questions, and never ask any question that might be trying to get to an individual's race, religion, ethnicity, marital status, sexual orientation, or other factor that truly doesn't play a part in whether or not they are the right candidate for the job. That will help you not only mitigate risk, but help candidates feel as though you're making a fair and objective decision. Many times my clients ask me, how can I make sure that my new hire gets off to the right start? It's very important that you have a structured process in place for every new hire that comes in so everyone has the best possible experience. The introductory period is usually around 90 days for most new hires. You should make sure that you have that full 90 days planned out. If you kick it off with an orientation process, it's very important that that orientation day feels like a warm welcome to the new hire. I try to stay away from too much paperwork or talking through policies. While you need to do a little bit of that, you want to make sure that you spend most of the time talking about the history of your company, the culture, your mission, vision, values, and really what makes your team special. At the end of the orientation day, you want to make sure that new hire walks away thinking, I've made the best decision of my life. I'm so happy that I'm with this employer. Once the employee's gone through the orientation day, you want to make sure that you start giving them the skills and training necessary to be successful in their position. It's very important to have a training plan. Think about all the things that you may need that new employee to do and break it down into specific training days, whether it be spending time shadowing a coworker, sitting through an online training, or just learning on the job. Make sure that you have a plan. In order to support that person during the process, not only should their manager be involved and checking in with them on a regular basis, but you should also pair them up with what I refer to as a work buddy. Not someone to manage them or to look at their work, but someone really to kind of hold their hand through that introductory period, to help them when maybe they have an issue fitting in with the team, or they have simple questions that they might be too embarrassed to ask their manager. That person can really help create the best experience for the new hire because they feel supported and like they have someone who has their back. The last thing during the onboarding process is to make sure that at the end of your introductory period, you have some form of closure or celebration. Sit down with the employee, talk to them about what's gone really well during the introductory period, as well as some things that they might still need to work on, and then discuss how you're going to be moving forward. Just be sure that you really celebrate that they've completed that introductory period and emphasize how happy you are to have them on the team. If you do all of these things, you will really set your new employees up for success. Having a performance management process in place is really key to driving the success of your business. Your business, your employees, have no idea where they're going unless you make it very clear what your goals and objectives are for the year. That's why I recommend having a very solid performance management process. So what does that look like? At the beginning of your year, you should always kick off by letting employees know what the goals and objectives are for the organization and how they individually can help further those goals. Make sure that they have a very clear understanding of what they can do to help not just their department but the entire company be successful. Then from there, meet with the employee on a regular basis, whether it be weekly or monthly, to discuss their performance to those goals and objectives. Check in and see how they're doing. If they're on track, celebrate. If they're falling a little bit behind, that's okay. Talk to them about the things that they can do to get back on track and meet those goals and objectives by the end of the year. The regular one-on-one discussions, in my opinion, are the most important part of the performance management process because that's really how you build a relationship with the employee and make sure that they know where they stand in terms of performance. You should also have some formal steps in the process. As a best practice, I typically recommend at mid-year and at the end of the year, sitting down with the employee and having a formal discussion regarding their performance. That's when you might write up a mid-year evaluation or an annual evaluation. That's really helping you and the employee make sure that you're on the same page, you know what the expectations are, you know the ways in which the employee's really exceeding in those areas, and you may also identify areas where they can improve, or if they're not meeting a goal or expectation because of a roadblock that's in their way, you as a manager can help them remove that block. During the one-on-ones, I always recommend that you follow a pretty similar agenda. Ask the employee, what went really well this week or month? What was a big challenge that you faced this week or month? And how can I help you as your manager? Doing that gives you information about the employee's performance, but also gives them a chance to share their perspective and to ask you for help. I find that if you keep up with those regular weekly or monthly meetings, by the end of the year, you and your employee have a much clearer idea of what they need to do to perform and then have a positive impact on the performance of the organization. Employee development is extremely important to engaging and retaining employees. Employees want to feel like their manager cares about their success and is helping develop them, not even just within the position that they're in, but for the position that they want to be in. I find, though, that many clients struggle with, how do I develop my employees? Historically, there seems to be the thought that employee development equals training. And I can tell you that that's not always the case, especially formal training. While formal classroom training is certainly a great way to transfer knowledge and skills and to develop an employee, there's so many other ways that you can develop employees in your business. Examples include allowing the employee to shadow someone who's in the role they want to be in, or someone who has an area of expertise that maybe they want to work on themselves. You may also send them into a different department, not just to view one other employee, but to look at a whole other department that maybe they work with on a regular basis, but they don't quite understand exactly what that department is responsible for or what they do in their day-to-day. You can also have them join groups. Various groups like professional networking groups, professional organizations are a great way for your employees to meet other professionals in their field and learn and develop in that way. I also like setting up employees with mentors, both informally and formally within the organization. Someone who can help guide them professionally and give them advice, not just on the way they do their job, but also how to balance their family with their job, or how to interact with a difficult coworker. Really someone who can help them just refine themselves as a professional. So all of these are different things that you can do to develop employees, and there's certainly many more. Just don't get stuck in the trap of thinking that formal classroom training is the only form of development that you can provide your employees. Many times clients ask me, what is employee engagement and why does it matter? Employee engagement is not employee satisfaction. It's not employee happiness. Those things are certainly important. But employee engagement is all about the level of commitment that employees feel towards the organization and towards their work. One of my favorite books about employee engagement is called The Truth About Employee Engagement, and it's by an author, Patrick Lencioni. In the book, he really stresses that there's three sources of job misery: anonymity, irrelevance, and measurement. So your job as an employer is to really combat those three sources of job misery. You can do it in several ways. So first, anonymity. You want to make sure your employees feel known. Get to know them as an individual. Remember their birthday. Find out information about their family. Know what it is that they really love about their work, where they want to go in the future, what their future goals are. Make sure that they know that you know them as a person, not just as a cog in the wheel of the business. For irrelevance, you really want to make sure that employees know how what they do day to day ties to the overall goals and objectives of the organization. So if you have the overall goal and objective, make sure that you boil it down for that employee and they know how what they do day to day actually ties into that greater goal. And then the last is a measurement. Especially top performers hate not knowing how their performance is managed. They want to succeed. They want to know that they not just met your expectations but exceeded them. So it's extremely important that you make sure that all employees know how they're being measured and that those measurements are fair and objective. If you do those few simple things, you can find that you will increase the employee engagement among your staff and the performance of your business overall will improve as a result. I find that many employers give a lot of thought to their onboarding process, but they don't often give a lot of thought to their exit process. In some ways, the exit process, or the way that your employees leave the organization, is just as important as the way they come in. Whether an employee's resigning or is being terminated, it's important that they feel as though they're treated with respect and that the process goes as smoothly as possible. One way that I find you can really manage and control your exit process is to have a termination checklist. It really helps make sure that you're organized. So once you receive that resignation or you terminate an employee, you know what you need to do next. Things like contacting your benefits broker to let them know that they're going to be terminated from the benefits program. Making sure that you collect company property, keys, laptops, cell phones, etc. Making sure that you ask them various questions. One thing I highly recommend is that anyone who's exiting the organization favorably or through resignation it goes through an exit interview process. It's really your chance to get feedback from employees that you might not otherwise receive from employees who are still in your organization. During that exit interview, you can ask them questions like, What's the best thing about working for this company? What's the worst thing about working for this company? If you could wave a magic wand and change something about the company or your department or your manager, what changes would you make? The most important thing is if you conduct the exit interviews and you gather that information, that you actually take action based on the feedback that you receive. You want to make sure if you're taking the time for that exit interview that you're really truly going forward with an action plan and not just putting the files in your desk. So the most important thing really when you're exiting an employee is to make sure that, again, it's a seamless process, that you have, it runs as smoothly as possible, and that when the employee leaves, they still have a very positive view of the company. As an HR consultant, I often get calls from clients who are struggling to have a difficult conversation with an employee. Managers really struggle to have difficult conversations for several reasons, but I find that a lot of it is the fear of the conversation and not really knowing what to say. That's why it's important to really plan. Anytime you're having a difficult conversation, especially if it's around an employee's performance, to plan and have some bullet points for the conversation to make sure that you're prepared and that you know how the conversation is going to go. I have a particular model that I'm a big fan of when talking to employees. It's the desk assertive communication model. So it's DESC. D is describe the dilemma. So let the employee know what the dilemma is. Be careful not to use broad sweeping statements like, you're disorganized, you're a bully, I think you have a poor work ethic. Instead, focus on objective things that you can observe. I find that you don't get back to your emails on time. Your desk is a mess. The tone that you used with the staff in the meeting yesterday was intimidating. You'll find that that will keep people from becoming defensive because you're really focusing on observable behavior and not your subjective opinions. From there, once you've described the dilemma, you want to explain the effects. So make sure that the individual knows the effect that that particular behavior is having on them, on you as their manager, on other employees. Be very specific, again, about what that effect is. So an employee who's regularly late all the time may need to know that the effect is that the business isn't able to open on time or it puts a burden on other employees. Then for S is specify solutions. Here's where you say, this is the issue and here's how I believe we can solve it. At this point in the conversation, this is really where you want to involve the employee. So you want to specify solutions, but you also want to gauge whether or not they're bought into that solution. So you may ask questions like, do you think that's reasonable? Is that something that you're able to do? And if they have any objections or concerns, make sure that you talk through it with them, because if that objection or concern is still out there, they're never going to follow through on the solution. And that brings me to the last point, which is C, call for commitment. Once you've had the discussion and you've nailed down your solutions, you want to make sure that you have the commitment from both the employee and yourself that you'll follow through on the solutions. So that's where you ask questions like, do I have your commitment? Are you going to follow through on this? Can I rely on you to do what we've discussed? And you want to make sure that you have their buy-in. If you don't have their buy-in, you probably need to continue the conversation until you can get to that closure. The other thing, other than just calling for a commitment, is in some cases you do have to be clear on the consequences. So if you're further down the discussions and you've had issues with performance, you want to make sure that the employee knows what the consequences may be if they don't follow through on the solutions. I find this model to be extremely helpful. Hopefully you do too. Really takes a lot of the guesswork and fear out of having those difficult conversations. Conducting a termination conversation can be one of the worst aspects of being a manager. People are uncomfortable having the conversations. Typically, you know the impact that you're going to have on that individual's life. I find that many of my clients really struggle to have those conversations. And if I'm being honest, I've been in HR for well over a decade, and it's still one of my least favorite aspects of my job. That being said, it's extremely, extremely important that when you're having a termination conversation, you do it in a way that's professional, respectful, and fair to the employee who's leaving the organization. If you've been talking to an employee about performance concerns or there's an instance of gross misconduct, it's really important to kind of go through a couple stages and think through your termination process. So the first thing you want to do is really look at your documentation. You want to think through, have I appropriately addressed these issues with the employee? Were they given a chance to improve? You never want to conduct, especially a performance-related termination conversation with an employee where it's an absolute shock to the employee. They're going to be mad. They're going to wonder why you didn't bring it up to them previously. So you want to make sure that you've given them a fair shake. If you look through your documentation and you feel like you've had the conversations, you've really given them a chance, you've supported them in the areas where they needed support, then it probably is time to move towards a termination. At that point, you need to start planning for the conversation. So the first thing you should do is come up with your speaking points. You don't want your speaking points to be long. A termination discussion should always be pretty short and to the point, but you do want to let the employee know what decision you have made, why you have made the decision, share any important information they might need to know, what's going to happen to their benefits, how they're going to receive their final payroll, all those questions an exiting employee may have. Make sure you bullet out all of those talking points. While you don't want to read through them on the termination conversation, it'll really help take your nerves off and make the conversation go much smoother when you have it. The next thing you should do is really give a lot of time and thought to how and when you're going to conduct the conversation. You want to make sure that you give the person a certain level of confidentiality and that you treat them respectfully. So make sure that you select a time and a location where it's going to be private. Very few employees are going to be privy to the conversation. It's always a good time either early in the morning or late in the day when not as many people are in the office, and you can help the person make a swift, graceful exit without alarming other employees or embarrassing the employee who's been terminated. So really give a lot of thought to that time and location. From there, it's having the conversation. Biggest piece of advice I can give is it's like pulling off a Band-Aid. It's not easy, but you gotta do it. And then once you've had the conversation, certainly you won't feel good, but you'll have the conversation behind you. So you should have that conversation as soon as you can. Be kind and respectful to the employee. While at the same time, you want to make sure that you don't apologize, you don't overly discuss or debate the reason for termination. All that does is make the employee question whether or not they should have been terminated. So you should be firm but fair in your reason behind the termination. Be respectful and keep the conversation as short as possible. It should never be more than 10 minutes. If you've gone longer than 10 minutes, the conversation has probably gone too long. Once the termination discussion has happened, make sure that you follow up, appropriately notify other employees in the organization that the employee is no longer with the organization. Make sure that you take care of things like sending the final paycheck, collecting corporate items, making sure that they know how their benefits will be moving forward, and treat them as respectfully as possible. Because again, the goal is really to make sure that that employee leaves, even though they may not be happy with your decision, that they feel like the company was fair and treated them respectfully. Oftentimes, business owners ask me, how can I make sure that I'm hiring people who are a good fit, not just technically, but also have the right personality for the job? Before you can really hire the right person for your company, you really need to understand you and your company itself. It's very important that you're very clear on what are the goals, mission, values of your company, and what's your culture. The reason why I say that is because in order to identify someone who fits into your culture, you need to know what your culture is first. Once you have a really solid feel for what your goals, mission, values are within your company, then during the interview process, you should be extremely honest about your culture and the way that you do business. What I find is that when you're really honest about your business and transparent, you tend to attract the candidates who are the right fit for your business and truly buy into that culture. And you tend to scare off or deflect the candidates who maybe are not the right fit for your business. So if you're a work hard, play hard organization and you have a candidate who really is just looking for an easy job where they can come in for a couple hours a day and not work much overtime and maybe not push themselves, it's probably going to scare them away. Same thing, if you're really driven by technology or something and someone that just isn't them, many candidates will actually self-select out of the process because they realize it's just truly not the best organization for them. Another way that you can make sure you're hiring the right people is really by asking those behavioral-based questions. So know what you're looking for in an individual and ask them questions that will help you determine how they would handle a particular situation. So if you're really customer service oriented, you may ask them, what's a time that you went above and beyond with a customer and delivered a high level of customer service? Tell me about it. See what they say. Does that fit your vision of great customer service, or does it fall short? If you want someone who's really project driven and really can get things done, ask them. Tell me about a time that you pushed a hard project forward and met difficult deadlines. I want to hear about it. Listen to what they say. Does that fit your expectations of someone who's project driven and can meet the deadlines for you? Really think through not just what they're saying, but what that might say about them in the way that they could work if they were selected to work with your organization. So doing all those things, being really clear and transparent about your business, and asking those behavioral-based questions really will help you identify the right candidate for your business.